Welcome to MegaBucks Radio. Conversations with successful entrepreneurs, sharing their tips and strategies for success. Real-world ideas that can put MegaBucks in your bank account. Here's your host, Nina Hershberger.
Welcome to today's show. This is your host, Nina Hershberger. And, you know, if you're in business, chances are, if I ask you what is it you need the most, you're going to say more clients. That's the number one thing that most people say. Well, you know, there's a number of ways to get more clients, but one of the most successful is having other people bring clients to you. I call it referral marketing, and my guest today, Steve Gordon, is an expert on that referral marketing. He wrote a book. In fact, he's written, I guess, Steve, did you say you've written 4 books now?
I've written 4, and number 5 is on the way.
Awesome. Well, the one we're going to talk about today is referrals, 10x referrals, half the effort, and exponential network strategy. So in other words, getting those clients to come to you without spending a lot of work. So welcome, Steve, to today's show.
Thanks for having me, Nina.
So tell me a little of your background. Well, how in the world did you get to be an expert in not only referral marketing, but we're going to segue even to podcasting?
Sure. So I started out in my professional career with a technical degree and went to work for a technical consulting firm in a tiny little discipline of engineering called geomatics, which I would imagine no one has ever heard of if they listen to this. And was really fortunate because the founder of that company was pretty, had a lot of foresight and knew he wanted to ultimately kind of transition out. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was his transition plan. So 4 years out of college, he came to me and asked me to take the company over and run it as CEO, and I did that. And he was still involved for a number of years. But it really gave me an opportunity to work in, kind of all parts of that business in a really short period of time. And one of the things that we really struggled with was marketing and business development. Some days the phone would ring off the hook and it was amazing. And other days the phone wouldn't ring at all. And we had really no earthly idea why one day was one way and the other day wasn't. So I really kind of started at that point studying marketing and business development, really, felt that was one of my primary roles at that point. So that's kind of where it all started. Did that for about 10 or 11 years. We grew that firm to about 10 times larger in revenue. And I left then about 11 years ago to start our current firm. I work with other, professional service firms, experts, and we help them create systems for their business development. Part of that is often around referrals, and we've got a few other tools that we use related to that. But that's kind of how I got to this point. And in 2014, I wrote the book that you mentioned, Unstoppable Referrals, where it really laid out an approach that we had been testing for a couple of years at that point, and now testing for, I guess, about 9 years, almost 10 years. And improving all along the way. And so it was just a very easy way to get referrals that's comfortable for most people.
Well, I know in your book you talk about the fact, are you even referable? Tell me what that means, Steve.
Well, when we look at a client business, we look at 4 areas that really kind of determine their referability. And the first is, are they different in some measurable way? And for an awful lot of businesses, that's kind of where the conversation stops, because they're not. They're just another. There's for example, financial advisors who we do a lot of work with. For a lot of financial advisors, you could line up 100 of them, and you couldn't tell a lick of difference between number 1 or number 100. Or any in between. So the first thing we look at is, are you different? The second is that, are you valuable? How are you valuable to your clients? Are you likable? And finally, are you trustworthy? And, and businesses have varying degrees of those 4 qualities. And then what we'll do is we'll work with them to begin to communicate those things. And there are really only 3 things that you can change in your business that will kind of communicate those 4 qualities. And those things are your process, your personality, and your product. And, for a lot of people, you might not have flexibility around your product. You might be constrained by regulation. And so for most service businesses, it sort of falls on your personality, which is an asset that most businesses ignore, and it falls on your process. And virtually everybody I ever talk to in business, every entrepreneur has a unique way that they go about doing what they do because they believe that there's an advantage to that. Yet most keep that a secret. So those are the 2 areas that we find are easiest to sort of create referability and that differentiation around.
So if I hear what you're saying, so if you got the financial planner and between a 1 and 100 and they all look alike, there really is something that makes them very unique and very different, and you help them figure that out because that's what they're going to bring forward in their marketing. Am I catching that right?
Exactly. So, they're a great example. They have no control over the product they sell. So they're selling an investment, maybe it's a mutual fund. They, if they want to tweak the way that product is designed, and they go up to Vanguard and say, it would be great if we change the mutual fund. Vanguard's going to tell them, get out of here, right? So they have no influence over the product, but they have a unique personality, and it's likely that unique personality is what attracts their current clients to them, but they're probably not, they probably take it for granted. They're probably not really using that in their marketing and their messaging. And they likely have a unique process, the way that they go about doing what they do. So, for example, if we stick with financial advisors, there's a very successful financial advisor who's been a client of ours for about a decade, and he has created a unique process around the planning that he does. Now, 80% of this is probably identical to what every other advisor does, but the 20% is magic. And so he's taken that and he's branded it and named it. He calls it the Secure Retirement Method. And he's the only one in the world that has the Secure Retirement Method and follows these certain specific steps.
What's brilliant about that, if you Google that, he's the only one that comes up. So he's named his process, I'm sure with your encouragement or with your guidance. And so that is really an amazing thing to do. Personality, I'm very curious before we keep going on down the referral thing, but personality, most people say, I'm just pretty normal. How do you bring that personality out in them?
So I'll give you a same client because I think it's useful to kind of show how we do this with one person. So early on, in our relationship with him, we helped him write a book that outlined his process. Okay. And so he travels around and goes to conferences in the industry. And, often at those conferences, they'll have a celebrity speaker, right? So everywhere he went, once he had that book, he would take a copy of the book, in his briefcase. And he'd go up to the speaker, the famous speaker at the conference, and he'd say, I've got a copy of my book here. And you know what? I'm going to buy a copy of your book because they always sell the speaker's books in the back of the room. I'd love to get a copy of you holding my book and me holding your book. And so he made a habit of using that part of his personality and, meeting these celebrities, getting a picture with them, and then very intentionally taking that back and using it in all of his marketing. So now he's got photos where he's, standing next to George Foreman. They're each holding each other's books. He's got photos next to Robert Kiyosaki, and he's got, a photo next to a former Secretary of the Treasury, which is relevant, obviously, in his world. And now he uses all of that in his marketing. And so it creates this persona, this personality, which is true to his real personality. He's the kind of guy that'll go up and say hi to somebody, but now he's able to use that and bring everyone in his market kind of along vicariously to experience that bit of his personality, because he's got these photos, he's got stories to tell around it, and that has turned him into a local celebrity over the course of the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It's funny. I don't know who your marketing mentor has been in the past, but mine has been Dan Kennedy. And one of my very most favorite thing that he ever said or anything was talking about personality and marketing. And for 11 years, I have had a writer write a dog column. So it's, and I publish it in different locations, and people can actually, I can syndicate it so they can subscribe to it. And so even if they're not a personality, even if they say, I'm just too boring, I can't go up and ask him to take a picture with me. I mean, I'm just too nervous. The dog can do all sorts of things, and they do, falls in love with the poodle next door and so on. So, that is really great.
Let's tie this back real quick for everybody so they understand why this is important related to referrals, because, it's very difficult sometimes to, particularly if you're in a heavily regulated industry, as we've said, to innovate your product. So what's going to make someone choose you over someone else? Well, going back to those 4 qualities we talked about, one of them was likability. And, and you can do an awful lot with your personality, and not another business on the planet can copy that, because nobody else is you. It's one of the few areas where you have an absolute monopoly and 100% differentiation, but most of us walk around and ignore it. And that's why it's important.
Yeah, no, that's so smart. So is that one of the keys in your book? You talk about keys to making it easy to refer you. Is that one of those keys?
Well, so in the book, the things we've talked about are sort of the foundation for, how to think about being referable. But one of the things that I discovered back in 2012, I gave a series of talks over that summer. I taught about 300 entrepreneurs, basically what amounted to all of the conventional wisdom at that time about referrals, which you can boil it down to 2 points. Ask all your clients and ask them often. And then if they do ever give you a name, follow up, relentlessly with the person that they refer. And that's not necessarily bad advice. But about 6 months after all of those talks, I started following up with people who had attended, because I was looking for case studies, right? And these were the most depressing conversations I've ever had, because none of them did anything. And they hadn't followed through, even though they left those workshops saying, I'm going to do this. This is the most important thing I've got to get done in my business. And I started asking questions, because anytime you see this disconnect between what people say they really want and need and their action, for me, it kind of got my brain going. I really wanted to dive in and understand why. And what I found through all of that is that the act of asking for referrals for most business owners is uncomfortable. And if you dig into that a little bit more, the reason that it's uncomfortable is because you're kind of going back to the goose that laid the golden egg, and you're strangling the goose. So your clients who are paying you, and who hopefully feel good about your relationship and may even want to refer you, you're going back and asking them to do something really difficult, and you're taking from the relationship rather than giving value in. And what we found was that, for most of our clients, unless they're professional salespeople, if you go and ask them to give you a referral, what you're really asking them to do is to go to somebody that they have a valuable relationship with and sell that person on having a sales meeting with you. Now, that's the most challenging thing in any business. That's why we pay salespeople so much money to go prospect and sell, right? And here's a person who isn't in your business, isn't going to get paid, and hasn't been trained in all, think about all we invest in salespeople to train them. And here's this untrained and unpaid salesperson that you're hoping will go cajole somebody that they know and care about into meeting with you so you can sell them something. What's the likelihood of that happening? And what we found is that most business owners know that that's what they're asking for, and they're a little reluctant to go make the ask. So when we talk about making referrals easy, we're talking about flipping that whole process. Instead of it being a taking process, turn it into a giving process. And I'm happy to go into how we do that, but that's really what we talk about there with making it easy.
Yeah, please, Steve, go ahead.
Well, so going back to the very first thing we talked about on referability, one of the things that you can innovate is your process. And you've probably already done that. You probably have a really unique way that you solve a really difficult problem for your clients or your customers. And what we found was that by packaging up all of the knowledge that you've developed and putting it in a nice convenient package that's easy to share, that you now give someone a really valuable piece of information that they can go share with somebody. And what we're not talking about here is a sales piece or a brochure or anything like that. In fact, the thing that we found works absolutely best for this is a short book. Being able to take all of your thinking on a particular topic and clearly articulate to a future client what the problem is that they face, what are all the consequences of not dealing with that problem that they probably don't know about, but they should know about. And then, what's the unique mechanism that you have that solves the problem for them, and explaining that so they can understand it in plain terms, and then painting a picture for them of what life is going to be like once this is solved and how amazing it's going to be. I always tell our clients, it's like, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. We start off with, the house on top of the Wicked Witch, and we're told we have to follow the yellow brick road. Well, that yellow brick road is your unique mechanism, the thing that you use to get the result for people. And if you follow all that along, you end up in Oz, and Oz is amazing. It's sparkling and emerald, and it's everything you'd ever dreamed of, right? Well, we want to paint that picture for your future client. And if we can package all that up in a book that actually has real value, whether they do business with you or not, for the reader, then you can go to your clients and say, Nina, I know a lot of your clients really struggle with referrals, and I'm on a mission to change the way that businesses get referrals. And in fact, it's so important to me that I sat down and I wrote a book about it. And what I'd love to do is find a time when we could maybe spend 15, 20 minutes and brainstorm who in your network really would benefit from reading my book, because I'd like to give them a copy. I'd like to send it to them and send it as a gift from you. Would you be interested in doing that?
And so you get more yeses than that, obviously. Yeah.
You get lots of yeses because you're aligning your interest with their interests with the prospect's interest, right? So if they know people that in our example here would really benefit from growing their business, which is likely every business owner. So that's the prospect's interest. Well, now you allow your client or your referral partner to go be a hero to that person that they know by saying, hey, I'm connected to this guy, Steve, and he wrote this really great book on referrals, and he's allowed me to give away copies, and I'd love for you to have one. Now they get to be a hero for that person. They get tons of credit, social credit for doing that. And you get a referral. And now everybody's interests are served.
In your book, you talk about a referral kit. So is the book part of this kit, or is it the kit?
So what we recommend is that that the kit is the book. But there are other ways you could package up information and be effective. So back in 2014, when I wrote this, we had a client who was taking that same approach, but they had recorded an audio that described all of the key things. They were a builder who specialized in building restaurant franchises. So all the key things that a restaurant franchise owner would need to think about as they were planning to build their location. And they put all of that, onto an audio CD. So that's one way to do it. We've have clients that have done it with webinars where they'll go and say, I've created this presentation. I would love to deliver this presentation to the people in your network or your audience that it would be a fit for. And we can do it by a webinar or a lunch and learn, back when we all got together, host a seminar in person. So there are lots of ways you can package up the information. So that's what we mean by Referral Kit is you're taking this information that you have, this knowledge and wisdom that you have, and you're packaging it up in a way that makes it easy for someone to share. Now, what we found over the last 9 years is that the most effective form is a book. It has staying power, particularly a physical book, because it owns real estate in the prospect's world. So I can give you an example of how that works. I have one of our current clients. We're actually in the process of writing a book for him, and he got a copy of my books sometime around 2015, 2016. So it's been quite a few years, but it's been sitting on his bookshelf. And he finally got to the point where it was important and time to take action. And he remembered us because I was sitting there and staring back at him, from his bookshelf. So I owned that little bit of real estate in his world.
Yeah, and I think throwing a book away is a lot more harder than throwing a brochure or a business card or a pen or anything like that as well.
Absolutely. It's taboo in our society to throw books away.
Yeah. So I want to summarize, and then we're going to transition into podcasting because I'm very fascinated to listen more about that. So to be referable, you've got to be different. You've got to give value. You've got to be likable and trustworthy. And to be unique, you've got something that's different in your process, your personality, or your product. So you're setting the basis of all of that. And then, of course, your short book, because that's going to be, in my world, I call it almost like a 24-hour salesman. Because that referral source, they're never going to be able to say exactly what it is you'd like them to say, but your book does. So your latest book is Podcast Prospecting. So my guess is now that you've worked with clients and you've got kind of their foundation, if you will, all set. So they got their book. They know what their process or their personality they've trademarked it or whatever it is. So now you've segued into podcasting. So tell me how that happened.
Well, so part of the original strategy in Unstoppable Referrals was to use interviews to build new relationships, to open new relationships with centers of influence. And, and podcasting hadn't really exploded the way it has over the last couple of years when I wrote this. I had a podcast going back to 2012, and I actually used the strategy we talk about in the book to build relationships with about 50 partners all over the world, 50 entrepreneurs. All of them had a network or an audience, and I did that during 2012. By the time I came back 2 years later and had written the first book, Unstoppable Referrals, I was able to go back to those 50 and say, hey, I've got this book. I would love if you would, be willing to share with your audience. And 15 of those 50 said yes to that. And those 15 people that I created a relationship with through that podcast helped me get 5,000 copies of the book out in about a week.
So back up. So the podcast was your podcast, And were they just interviewed on your podcast, or they have a podcast?
No, they were just people that I had interviewed, and they had their own network or their own audience. But I used that podcast as a vehicle to go and build relationships with the strategic partners that I wanted to get to know. And so in my book, Podcast Prospecting, that's really what we teach, is how to use the podcast. Once you've got your referral kit in place, now you need an ever-growing network of people who have the right audience or the right connections, where you can build a relationship with them, and you can then be able to offer to share your book or your referral kit through them out to their network. You need a way to sort of replenish and continue to grow your network. And what we found was you could do that the old-fashioned way. You could go to Chamber of Commerce meetings or conferences, and you could have coffee dates and lunches and all of that. But that takes a tremendous amount of time. And I don't know if you've ever done that, but I used to, at one point in the heyday of my in-person networking, I would camp out at a coffee shop for like an afternoon a week, and I'd have meetings about every 20 or 30 minutes. I'd just hold the table and people would sort of rotate through. And that was great, but people would show up hurried. They wouldn't be prepared. We'd leave the meeting and both be excited, saying this is going to be, a great mutually beneficial relationship. And then they'd disappear. They'd go in the witness protection program. I'd never hear from them again. When you use a podcast as your way to start and grow relationships, it completely changes the dynamic, because you're the one now inviting. And you're inviting them to a platform, and you're inviting another business owner essentially to a platform where they can promote themselves. So they're going to show up as their best self. You're going to show up as your best self, because you're both you're on stage. And what we've found is that creates a level of energy and results in a level of relationship that you just don't get doing a coffee date or a lunch meeting, or, now these days, a lot of people are doing Zoom networking. It's not the same, because it's not going to be published. And the great thing about interviewing somebody like that on a podcast is they get to be the star of the show. You get to, just like what you're doing here to me, you've asked me to come on, and I get to talk about all the great things that I, basically my life's work for the last decade. And as the guest, I get charged up by that, which means I like you because of that. You're giving me this opportunity. It just creates this level of a relationship that's hard to do in any other way in as little as 30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah, that makes sense. If we go back to the financial planner, now the guy has a short book. He understands his personality. He's had pictures taken with celebrities. He's done everything you said. Now, is he then the person that you would set up to have his own podcast? Right. Yeah, exactly. And he would go and interview the influential people in the community, other business leaders who worked with or marketed to the same type of clients that he's seeking. Okay. And how often, what is the frequency that you suggest for their podcast? Well, we recommend weekly. And the reason we recommend weekly is that gives you 52 new connections a year. Lets you tap into 52 new networks of people a year. So, Steve, your business is the Unstoppable Agency. Do you then take the podcast from your clients and you do all the back-end work, I assume? Exactly. So what we found with our clients is that they really like a lot of these ideas. They make sense to them, but they don't necessarily have the team or the systems or the processes to execute on them. And so, so we've built that team and all of those processes. And so we really have kind of two sides of the company. One side will help a client write a book in about 60 days. And then the other side will take them once they've got the book in place, and we'll help them run their podcast. So all they have to do as the podcast host is show up and talk. So we'll help them
book the guests and, edit all of the audio and get it posted to their website and distribute it out to all the podcast services and all of the stuff that has to happen to make a podcast work.
That makes sense. I am looking at the clock, and we are almost out of time. Steve, I know there's going to be somebody who's listened to this who's saying, that's my man. I need to talk to him. How should somebody get a hold of you?
So definitely they can go to our website, unstoppableceo.net. But Nina, I think what we'll do is we'll set up a page just for your listeners. So if they go to unstoppableceo.net/Nina, they're going to find a free copy that they can download of my podcast prospecting book. So if they want to dive into that strategy, they can get a free copy of the book there. If they want to speak with me directly, they can book a call there. And we've got a few other free resources that they can take advantage of that'll really help their marketing.
You have been a wealth of information. It's so smart what people are doing with you. So thank you so much, Steve, for being on today's show.
Thank you, Nina. It's been a lot of fun.
So, folks, that's a wrap for today. Until next time, remember, success starts between your ears. Till next time, I'm Nina Hershberger.
Thank you for listening to MegaBucks Radio with Nina Hershberger. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or to listen to past episodes, visit megabucksradio.com.